Hello everyone, and welcome to the first proper episode of MattTGM's Boss Roster Breakdowns, title pending, where I analyze a game's boss roster and grade its quality based on 4 categories: difficulty, creativity, replayability, and entertainment value. Today's target is a game with a truly legendary boss roster, as in a boss roster with one entry that appears on many top 10 worst bosses ever lists. What an advertising point that is. Behold, Batman Arkham Asylum, a game that I've never actually featured on my channel before, so this is quite a notable and original game to cover. The boss roster of every Arkham game could honestly make for an interesting discussion regarding their design theory and philosophy, as well as what they even count as a boss. So let's start from the first entry in the series. Batman Arkham Asylum has 14 listed bosses, 11 boss encounters that I could actually see as boss battles, and 7 individual boss battles that are worth putting on a ranking video. Why do I categorize them like this? Well, Zaz is a glide kick in his first encounter and a batarang throw in his second, and Harley Quinn is standard combat with occasional running around, and you never actually fight her directly. They're not boss fights, so I won't be including them as part of this discussion. As for Imperfect Titan, Bane, Twin Titans, Scarecrow Skeleton Titan, Crash of the Titans, Elevator Titan, the Titanic, Security Guard Titans, they're all the same enemy design. A big boy that charges at you and can be stunned with a batarang while they do so, causing a crash into a wall, which causes damage and allows for a few strikes of melee, or preferably just repositioning so you can throw more batarangs at the next charge, eventually letting you deplete one of their 3 health bars. Bane has the special wrinkle, where he needs to have his venom pipe severed via melee after each third of his health is depleted, or he'll regenerate those health points. And every other Titan lets you jump on their back when they're stunned, and ride them around for a set time, able to control nothing they do except the direction they go in. This lets you deal extra damage to the other Titan, or just smack over the accompanying thugs a whole lot. As an initial concept, the Titans are powerful and intimidating foes, especially with the context of the story. By the time you're fighting your 6th identical Titan enemy, you'll just be going through the motions. The only differences here between them, Bane excluded, are the arena that you fight in and how many Titans and random thugs are in the arena, and that's not enough to properly differentiate these bosses between each other in a notable way. Now, I do enjoy fighting all the Titans, but that's just because this game's combat system is so good even after 16 years, that even the worst encounters on paper can provide good entertainment. Bane is both better and worse than the rest of the Titans, because he is the first proper boss of this kind. He's an actual character, he's part of an interesting story moment, and he does have that regeneration mechanic. But he also fights the exact same as the other Titans. He relies on standard enemies to provide extra gameplay, and he doesn't truly represent his character that well. There's a reason in my big boss ranking I placed him below the Twin Titans. Comparing Asylum Bane to Origins Bane, it's clear which one is the disappointment. And speaking of disappointing encounters, we have Titan Joker, the shoo-in choice for worst boss in this game, and the Arkham franchise, and a contender for the biggest boss blunder in gaming history. Granted, I personally think Imperfect Titan is worse, because at least you actually need to defeat Titan Joker to win, but that's not the point. This boss is awful, because it's hardly a boss, unless you count the brief moments where he's walking around and swinging at you while all you can do is run. Those collective 20 seconds, as well as the moments where you punch him on the ground to deplete his objectively present health bar, are the only reasons why I class this as a boss while I don't give Harley Quinn the same privilege. These two fights are very similar if you think about it. I know that I've been pretty negative so far, and there's more of it to come, but we have to acknowledge that this is the first attempt of creating bosses for a new combat system that focuses on fighting multiple enemies as its specialty. The melee combat of Batman Arkham shines when bouncing between 20 thugs at once, in a high free flow combo mixing in gadgets and special moves, which is why boss battles with a single enemy are so hard to do well for this series. Each entry has dealt with this in different ways, with Arkham City adopting a gadget focus, Arkham Origins relying more on cinematics, and Arkham Knight not having proper boss fights at all outside of the Batmobile. Arkham Asylum didn't really have an answer to this problem, probably because they hadn't actually gotten feedback on the game to realize it was a problem yet, hence the abundance of standard Titan enemies. I'll get more into this at the end of the video. But obviously we need to mention the good bosses as well as the bad, so here's Killer Croc, Poison Ivy, and Scarecrow. Out of the 3, the only traditional fight is Poison Ivy, as in she has a health bar and fights you by standing right in front of you. You face a towering plant monster that periodically opens up Ivy's shield and lets you hit her with a batarang, while you contend with exploding balls, not safe for work vines, and regular enemies. Why do people hold this boss in such high regard again? The spectacle is undoubtedly impressive, but you don't so much fight Ivy as you fight regular thugs with Ivy in the background, tossing a batarang every once in a while. This goes on for 2 separate health bars with minimal changes in mechanics, not really creating an engaging fight after the initial gameplay loop is established. If the fight was half as long, it'd be twice as good. That being said, the music, spectacle, character, and story stakes all elevate this fight, despite the basic mechanics, and it is a standout fight in the game just for not being another Titan. So Poison Ivy is one of the better bosses in this game, and one I'd consider decent if not properly good. But enough about that, let's get to the 2 famous bosses of this game, Killer Croc and Scarecrow. 2 boss fights that aren't boss fights and yet are the most highly regarded boss fights in this game. The one common factor between them is that they're stealth focused fights, which is handy foreshadowing for the future of the series' boss quality. Killer Croc forces you to sneak around on platforms while throwing a batarang at Croc when he pops up to repel him as he charges at you. Run too fast on the platforms and you'll die instantly. The atmosphere of this underground lair is tense, and Croc's emergences get the heart racing. You can use the line launcher to speed around this map without any sound, but if Croc pops up right in front of you, you'll be defenseless to fend him off before you die. So that's either clever design or coincidental countermeasures. The whole fight flips the concept of Batman on its head, turning you into the prey as you're stalked by a powerful predator. The issue with Croc is that he's a bit repetitive, seeing as the boss fight lasts for quite a while without any real change in mechanics, but this is a far better form of repetitiveness than fighting half a dozen Titan enemies. Great boss, if not a little simple, and it's a standout encounter in this game for a reason. But Scarecrow is what everyone comes to this game for, and he definitely stands out as the highlight of the entire game for me. The atmosphere in these encounters is fantastic, both in the hallucination segments leading up to the encounters and the actual battles themselves. The mechanics of these fights are varying forms of hide and seek, with giant Scarecrow's gaze serving as your obstacle and killing you instantly if he sees you, while you platform your way around the shattered asylum. There are parts where you need to use explosive gel or the bat claw, and timing is varied throughout all of the stages. It's always tense, even for a veteran, and the atmosphere always makes these a pleasure to replay. The combat sections throughout are simple and hardly last more than a few moments, but they don't feel shoehorned in, more like a quick break in the tense stealth encounters. Even the final segment in the cage area, the part that is just a straight up fight, feels fun because of the previously stated atmosphere and because it serves as a climax to the trilogy of stealthy Scarecrow battles in this game. It's the highlight of the game for a reason, and a standout moment in gaming that most superhero games try to replicate nowadays, to varying degrees of success. So, I've given a basic breakdown. How does this boss roster measure up on my grading scale? The difficulty of the bosses is all very fair. There's no unfair challenges or bullshit deaths to note here, apart from a couple of glitches during the Killer Croc section. Even on hard mode, the bosses aren't overly challenging, or unfairly so, with perhaps an exception for Poison Ivy. Everything is relative, and relatively, it's pretty good. I give it an 8. The creativity of these bosses is two-pronged. If we look at the majority, we see very little to praise here. A bulk of these bosses are identical to each other in terms of gameplay, and Poison Ivy, for as grand as the spectacle is just throwing batarangs at a background periodically and fighting standard enemies. But the Scarecrow and Killer Croc fights are dripping with ambience and creative set design, and the initial gameplay is fresh and compelling with the extra challenges provided. Granted, if you want to be cynical, Scarecrow is just a game of hide and seek, and Killer Croc is primarily sneaking slowly if you strip them down to their base mechanics, but it's the extra things and lack of frustration that makes them so good. I'll give this category a 5, largely carried by Scarecrow and Croc and the overall strength of Arkham Asylum's gameplay, and held back by the repeats of the Titan enemies even though they are justified by the story. The replayability of these bosses is not something I can hype up. Unlike future entries in the Arkham series, there really isn't any alternate strategy to these fights you can apply beyond self-imposed challenge runs and using the strategy of running away from Croc towards the plants during his encounter. Of course, I have replayed these fights multiple times and enjoyed them every time, but there's no inherent difference present in any of these, not even in terms of player expression. As sad as it is, I'm giving this category a 2, with that 1 point just there because of the Killer Croc fight. The entertainment value of these bosses is the real kicker here, and this is a great showing of how subjective this category can and will be moving forward. For example, despite the lack of variety and creativity, I find every boss on this list to be fun in some way 9 times out of 10, Poison Ivy on hard mode probably being my one exception. That does largely speak to the strength of Arkham Asylum's gameplay over the design of the bosses themselves. However, if I have a fun time, then I have a fun time. Ultimately, that's just how it goes. The quality and stakes of the narrative, the design and atmosphere of the asylum itself, and just how fun it is to be Batman in this game They all come together to give this game's boss roster a very high entertainment score, that being an 8 out of 10. Overall, Batman Arkham Asylum gets a boss score of 23 out of 40, just above the middle line. I think this is a fair score, as despite the highs of Scarecrow and Croc, a lot of this roster is undeniably average at best. But that's okay. Let me explain why. Batman Arkham Asylum is an incredible game, that much is undeniable, both helped along and hindered by its boss roster in various places. Like I said, it's pretty difficult to have a good melee boss fight against a single enemy when your whole combat system revolves around fighting groups of thugs you can knock over with a single hit. Other games in the future try to balance this in various ways, but Arkham Asylum just doesn't do this, possibly because they hadn't realized the issue yet, or they just didn't have the time and resources to dedicate towards it. But ultimately, this game's focus isn't on big boss fights, it's on delivering a peak Batman experience, and it does just that. The bosses are more about blending into the overall experience rather than being massive climactic fights along your journey, if that makes sense. Take Dark Souls 1. Half the bosses are pretty big losers because you're supposed to be engaged with the world and adventure, with a lot of the boss fights just being part of that world rather than being a highlight every single time, with notable exceptions of course. It's the same thing with this. The repeat Titan fights aren't meant to blow your mind each time, they're just part of Batman's journey. There's more focus on big group enemy encounters, predator maps and detective work, with the boss fights serving as special treats, such as Bane and Scarecrow. The difference is that the climactic mandatory final fight of Dark Souls 1 is actually good. There's definitely more of a boss focus in Batman Arkham City and Origins, much like Dark Souls 3 funny enough, so when we get to talking about those games I'll likely have a lot more to discuss. I'm always happy to go on another run through the Asylum, and I do enjoy fighting every boss, but that's mainly because the game is so good rather than the inherent quality of those bosses. Because if anyone out there is a fan of Titan Joker, you belong in Arkham Asylum. Thank you everyone for watching the first episode of this new series, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm starting off safe with a familiar game, but expect me to branch off into new and interesting games in the future of this series. If you have any feedback, please leave it in the comment section below, I'm always keen to improve, and also leave any suggestions for future games you'd like me to cover, whether I've already featured them on this channel or not. It felt nice to put on my analytical hat for a change, and I'd like to continue doing so. If you did enjoy watching, please like and subscribe for more videos like this, and even more videos that are not like this. I'm trying to hit 5,000 subscribers by April 2026, and I'm doing my best to prove worthy of that. If you think that I've earned it, consider checking out my Patreon for sneak peeks and early access to videos, special voting privileges, and perhaps a little bit more. With all that said, I think we're done here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.